Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Rebuttal podcast, where we break down case law, calamity, and of course, chaos in the legal field. I am once again your host, Reb Maisel, and today we are back. Just like I said, I don't lie to you. Well, sometimes I do, but not always. We are back 1 week later. Okay, incredible, gorgeous, awesome weekly episodes, shorter episodes. Let's skip the hullabaloo, the hullabalizzy, and get right into it. A trigger warning for this episode. Not for anything necessarily distressing, but if you don't enjoy things that are maybe like gory, okay, maybe things that like related to torture, maybe skedaddle, okay, maybe hop skiddly doo dah day to a sillier episode like How to Get Away with Burglary. That one's a good one. Okay, let's do it. In 2019, a judge in southern Russia halted proceedings in a bankruptcy case to hold a special hearing to discuss a 1488 Dutch Renaissance painting. Apparently, Regional Appellate Court Judge Andrei Garbovsky was a bit taken aback when a creditor in a bankruptcy case, Stanislav Golubyev, sent the court some documents in an envelope decorated with an image of a gruesome painting. According to a document posted on the court's website, the court believes, quote, that this circumstance demands an explanation from the creditor, including determining whether it was a display of extreme disrespect to the court and consideration whether there are grounds for imposing a fine. What exactly was on this envelope? Why, indeed, did this man, this creditor, have to show up to court and explain himself? This beautiful, gorgeous, envelope wasn't seen by the court as just an appreciation for the arts. No. Because what was the painting exactly? The painting was the Judgment of Cambyses by Dutch artist Gerard David, painted in 1498. What does this painting depict exactly? Oh, nothing much. Just a judge from 500 BC being skinned alive for delivering an unjust verdict after accepting a bribe. Oh, yes, this is the story of our poor former judge Sisamnes and Persian Emperor Cambyses II, who decided to take matters into his own hands. We are going to get into not only the story behind this painting, but also touch on judicial impartiality and ethics in general. Why do we care that judges are impartial? Why is that important? And why, so recently, especially in the U.S. Supreme Court, is a lack of impartiality so devastating to the public's confidence in the way that our courts work? Let's break it down. Let's get into it, and hold on to your skin. Keep it attached to your cuerpos, to your bodies. Good Lord. Now, to be technical, the painting, the famous painting, The Judgment of Cambyses, is actually two paintings, okay? It's called a diptych, Diptych, a diptych. A diptych? I Googled the pronunciation and I still don't think I'm getting it right, but it's a diptych, okay? It's consisting of two oil-on-wood panel paintings, okay, that were commissioned in 1498. One side of it is the Judgment of Cambyses, which is where Persian King Cambyses II, okay, in the 5th century BC, handed down his sentence, his punishment, to the judge Sisamnes, who was accused of being corrupt. On the right side is called The Flaying of Sisamnes, which actually depicts Judge Sisamnes, after his throat was slit, having his skin be removed from his body. One by one, limb by limb, with a whole crowd of people, because people loved to watch that shit back then. They loved a dinner and a show. The painting wasn't commissioned until 2,000 years after this allegedly happened, okay? Because it had basically become this symbol for judicial impartiality and for rightness and for fairness in the judicial system, okay? King Cambyses II was, per this painting, seen as, the guy who wouldn't let corrupt judges stand. But in reality, the only reason why we know that any of this happened is because the great Greek historian Herodotus, wrote about it back in the 5th century BC. He said, this stuff happened, And a lot of historians argue that him telling this story wasn't to highlight how amazing it was that Cambyses really was absolutely not playing around with fair and impartial judges that he had in his society, okay, as Persian emperor, Persian king, okay? He was trying to imply, Herodotus, that Cambyses had gone insane. People argue that. They were like, no, I think he told this story because he was like, yo, Cambyses II losing his mind. And he only reigned for like 7 years, okay? And this was his big claim to fame, all right? People who don't even know much about the empire that he was running, okay, the Persian Empire that was lasting over this period, okay? They know this story, which is kind of nuts, all right? His claim to fame, whether he was insane or not, is that he was not letting anyone pull the wool over his eyes, okay? No bribes. No new friends, no new bribes. Sisamnes was a royal judge under King Cambyses II. He accepted a bribe from a party in a lawsuit and rendered judgment for the party that did not have the money for the bribe, okay? King Cambyses learned of this bribe. He said, wait, what up? Like, what's going on? And mind you, the lawsuit wasn't that big of a deal. It wasn't like a big trial. It was literally like some, two farmers pissed about some grain type of thing. Sisamnes was kind of like a lower judge anyway. It wasn't like a U.S. Supreme Court type of thing. It was like a lower judge type of thing, maybe like a state court judge equivalent to like America, okay? And Sisamnes, the king that he was like, you know what? It doesn't matter. It does not matter how big this case is. I am angry. I am mad. This is not going to fly. So he learned of the bribe, accused Sisamnes, had him stand, trial, which was basically him standing up and Cambyses II saying, hey, so this is what's going to happen. And he was going to be punished, all right? He was arrested and punished. But what exactly was his punishment? King Cambyses slit his throat and flayed off all of his skin. And then he strung the chair on which Judge Sisamnes had used to sit to deliver his verdicts with his skin. He upholstered the chair that Sisamnes sat in with Sisamnes's skin, DIY style. And it didn't even stop there. Cambyses II, King Cambyses, said, that's actually not enough for me. Bring in Sisamnes's son really quick. Because obviously we need someone to take the place of Judge Sisamnes. We have an opening. We have an open job position, Indeed.com. Okay. What are we going to do? To replace Judge Sisamnes, who he had just killed and flambéed, okay, like an onion, Cambyses appointed Sisamnes' son, Otanes, as the new judge. But Cambyses warned Otanes, hey, you should really remember exactly where the leather comes from in that chair that I'm forcing you to sit on. Yep, that's right. Otanes, Sisamnes' son, was, yes, now a new hire. Okay, love that. Love a job. Love disposable income. Okay, he was cashing checks. He was clocking in. But in order to sit at this job that really he had no choice, right? There was no, oh, no, thank you, I'm good. Like, I don't really need that job. No, like, you had no choice. Like, you were going to sit in this position. You were going to be the new judge. He couldn't replace it. He had to sit in the chair that his father's skin was made out of, DIY leathered. And he said, period, 100%. And he sat on that chair for years and years and years, where he sat and heard evidence, delivered his decisions on his dad's skin piece. Without doubt, King Cambyses' warning was definitely a little extreme, a little different, unique for sure, right? And 2,000 years later, okay, Gerard David was commissioned to paint it so that they could hang it in the town hall, okay? And he did that. And that is where this beautiful, famous painting comes from. And then later in 2019, a Russian creditor would then copy and print that painting of the flaying of Sisamnes on an envelope that he sent to a judge, and then they had a hearing about it. And they were like, okay, is this a threat? Because what the fuck, right? The outcome of the infamous envelope that was sent by a Russian creditor in 2019 was actually that there was no harm, no foul, okay? At a hearing on the matter, the judge in the case determined there was no intent to disrespect the court on Golubyov's part. According to a news source, Golubyov sent a written apology, presumably in a different envelope, and explained that the envelope with the painting on it had come from the office of his lawyer. His lawyer attended the hearing and told the court that the painting was not in and of itself offensive. And the judge was like, all right, but stop messing around, okay? The significance of this goes beyond, of course, just, hey, should we flay judges alive anymore? I think that the answer is going to be no, right? No, we shouldn't. But it, of course, brings to mind other symbols in the justice system, in our legal system, that have become ubiquitous with the impartiality and fairness that we are really supposed to uphold here, okay? In our justice system, anywhere. Not just in the US, but everywhere. One that comes to mind is, of course, the scales of justice, okay? The woman blindfolded, holding the scales, okay? The symbol for, hey, she's blindfolded because what? She's fair, she's impartial, she's objective. The scales of justice shouldn't weigh one side or the other. It should, you shouldn't be taking bribes, okay? Doesn't really have I don't think, as hard of an effect as, a massive color painting of a man being flayed alive, but it is supposed to evoke the same feeling of, hey, remember what your job is, right? Remember why you're here. Remember that you have a job to do, and your job is to be objective, your job is to be impartial, etc., etc., etc. But what does it mean for a judge to be impartial when deciding cases, and how can impartiality be assessed? It is well established and uncontroversial to say that judges must decide cases objectively to be fair. Impartiality is a central tenet, of course, of judicial decision-making. It is apparently controversial, however. There's a famous quote that is oft repeated in the criminal justice system that says, quote, "Show me a man who thinks he's objective, and I'll show you a man who's deceiving himself." Years of institutional boilerplate lip service against a background of increasingly egregious, even brazen disregard for basic norms of judicial ethics conflicts with the court's obligation to maintain the appearance of impartiality. That is significant. Not only does the appearance of partiality affect the litigants, it is detrimental to the rule of law and public confidence in the court. As the Supreme Court itself has explained, quote, "Justice must satisfy the appearance of justice." The Eighth Circuit described it this way, quote, "It is essential to protect the judiciary's reputation for fairness in the eyes of all citizens. This reputational interest is not a fanciful one. Rather, public confidence in the judiciary is integral to preserving our justice system." Starting in the spring of 2023 and continuing into the summer, media outlets reported that some Supreme Court justices had received undisclosed gifts valued at hundreds of thousands of dollars from wealthy benefactors, and failed to recuse themselves when those benefactors' matters went before the court or otherwise misused their positions and influence for personal gain. With each expose, Supreme Court ethics gradually became a matter of public concern to a degree not seen since 1969, when Justice Fortas resigned in a scandal over receiving $20,000 from a Wall Street financer. Now, mind you, in 1969, Justice Fortas still resigned over a $20,000 essentially bribe, okay? And that was the last time, really, everyone was really that shook over this kind of stuff. The justices, okay, that are unnamed in this article, but I'll name them here. Justice Thomas, Justice Alito, okay, for sure, the worst so far out of all of them, have not resigned. They haven't recused. They haven't done any of that shit. So, right, what we can be outraged, but when there's no outcome, what are we going to do about that? Okay, because at this point, it is the equivalent of these people basically being independent, not only of the political institutions they claim to be separate from, but they claim to be independent of heaven and God and country themselves. They think that they are above all of it, and it needs to change. These recent scandals have sparked discussion about the adequacy of existing ethical standards and financial disclosure rules for Supreme Court justices and how best to enforce them. The court first responded to these discussions with claims expressed both implicitly and explicitly that any sort of ethics reform imposed by Congress would violate constitutionally required separation of powers principles. Then, in November 2023, the court promulgated an ethics code that excused the justices' problematic conduct and included no enforcement mechanism, leaving the status quo largely intact. Because of course they did. You can't govern yourselves, babes. Are you joking? Though there is a code of conduct for United States judges, in addition to codes of conduct for all state court judges, okay, depending on the state that they're in, but that they basically, they very much mirror each other, okay? All justices have a very rigorous code they have to follow with respect to ethics, recusal, and reporting gifts, okay? You can't even send a fucking book to a goddamn judge without them being required under the code to report it, okay? But though the code explicitly governs the conduct of lower court federal judges, it does not include Supreme Court justices within its purview, specifically. Consequently, recent reform efforts have centered on the Supreme Court, particularly following the 2000 presidential election recount decision in Bush versus Gore. The late Justice Scalia's hunting excursion with Vice President Cheney, whom Justice Scalia voted in favor of in Cheney versus United States District Court for the District of Columbia, elicited accusations of extrajudicial and politically motivated impropriety. The late Justice Ginsburg's scathing critiques of then presidential candidate Donald Trump drew similar public scrutiny. The spring and summer of 2023 brought particularly jarring Supreme Court ethics lapses into the fore. Here is a list that provides a brief overview of 2023's most widely reported Supreme Court ethics lapses and consequently focuses on Justices Thomas, Gorsuch, Alito, and Sotomayor. Number 1, Justice Thomas. On April 6, 2023, ProPublica revealed that Justice Thomas had joined billionaire Republican megadonor Harlan Crow on undisclosed luxury trips for more than 2 decades. These trips included flights on Crow's private jet, vacations aboard his super yacht, and stays at his resorts. In fact, in only 3 decades on the court, Justice Thomas was treated to at least 38 destination vacations funded by a cad of industry billionaires. He did not report any of these trips in the financial disclosures he filed each year, not a single one, which he's required to under the code of ethics that he's bound to, that no one is enforcing. Perfect. ProPublica also reported that in 2014, Crow paid Justice Thomas and his family $133,363 in exchange for 3 properties in Georgia, one of which was the house where the justice's mother lived and purportedly continued to reside as of April 2023. Crow also donated $500,000 to a conservative political organization founded by Justice Thomas's wife and paid for the private school education of Justice Thomas's grandnephew. This is actually, I mean, yes, I heard about it. This was more in the news in 2023, okay? But just the fact that all of this shit I mean, these aren't even hard connections to make. They paid for the private school education of your grandnephew, donated $500,000 to your shit. Like, this isn't even, they didn't even try to hide this shit. Not even a shell company in sight. Like, that's embarrassing for us specifically, that it's that easy. The New York Times also revealed that Justice Thomas failed to repay a significant portion of a $250,000 loan from wealthy businessman Anthony Welters. The loan was inexplicably forgiven 9 years later. Stares at the audience. And y'all are bitching about my student loan payments? Bitch, forgive that shit. Why? Some ethics law experts say that these failures to report were clear violations of the Ethics of Government Act of 1978, which was intended to apply to all federal officials and requires disclosure of both real estate transactions and most gifts. Those are just the biggest ones of Thomas's. Not all of them. Google it if you'd like to learn more, because there is more. Justice Gorsuch. On April 25th, 2023, Politico reported that in 2017, Justice Gorsuch sold a 40-acre property to Brian Duffy, the chief executive of major law firm Greenberg Traurig. Justice Gorsuch's property had languished on the market for 2 years before finally being purchased just 9 days after his appointment to the bench. Justice Gorsuch made between $250,000 and $500,000 from the sale, according to federal disclosure forms. Though Justice Gorsuch reported the sale on his federal disclosure forms, he failed to disclose the identity of the land's purchaser and left that box on the form blank. After the sale, Greenberg Traurig was involved as either an amicus brief filer or representative counsel in at least 22 cases that came before or were presented to the court. Justice Gorsuch sided with the firm at least 8 times. stunning. While Justice Gorsuch's property sale may not be a clear violation of existing ethics laws, the conflict of interest presented by the transaction underscores the need for financial disclosure reforms for Supreme Court justices and also recusal reform. The concept of recusal, okay, doesn't just extend to Supreme Court justices, it also extends to lawyers. We are required to recuse ourselves in certain cases, withdraw our representation in certain cases when a conflict of interest is just too much. You cannot do your job. You can't be impartial. The appearance of impropriety is just so great, okay? This happens to judges all the time. If, for example, this happened to me all the time, where when you file a case in court, it randomly gets assigned to a judge, okay? It's like a lottery, like, oh, next judge in line, okay? And often some of these judges, especially like the state court judges around where my firm is, one of them or two of them, I believe, were former lawyers at the firm that I worked at. And then, they branched out and then became judges. They recuse themselves every single time a case with our law firm on the fucking header, on the goddamn caption, is presented to them. And the recusal reason, it's always an audit. They always just automatically, they file it, they go up recusal. They're my former employer, a former law firm. Because the appearance of impropriety, the appearance that they may side with the law firm, they don't even want to deal with that shit, right? They don't even want to deal with that shit. And also it's required, right? This isn't just them being like, well, it's like so, wow, aren't they so, like, they have so much integrity. No, like, it's required. Duh. Okay, that's just an example. The amount of times that Supreme Court justices do not recuse themselves when they should from like an opinion, et cetera, is bonkers insane. And it just all goes out the window. And we could do an entire episode just on the amount of cases that all of these justices have written, okay, on, opinions on, okay, pointed their vote one way or the other, okay, when there's only nine votes available, where they have heavy ties, personal ties, financial ties to one side or the other. It's nuts. It's nuts. Justice Alito, I call him Mosquito. I don't care if you think that I'm biased, but I am. The ways in which his opinions make me want to dry heave. If I ever saw him in person, I would tell him this to his face. On June 20th, 2023, ProPublica reported that in 2008, Justice Alito took a luxury fishing trip to a remote corner of Alaska and stayed at the King Salmon Lodge. He flew to the lodge for free aboard a private jet owned by Republican megadonor Paul Singer. His 3-day stay was paid for in full by Robin Arkley II, another wealthy conservative donor. Leonard Leo, the then leader of the conservative legal group, the Federalist Society, helped organize the fishing vacation and arranged Justice Alito's spot aboard Singer's jet. Justice Alito failed to disclose the entire excursion in his end-of-year federal disclosure forms. Justice Alito also did not recuse himself from reviewing the numerous cases involving Singer's hedge fund that came before the court after his Alaska trip. I will say this, if anyone around listening, okay, tell your friends, if anyone would like to also fund a luxury fishing trip to a remote corner of Alaska where I could stay at a beautiful, gorgeous lodge called King Salmon. Okay, if they would like to offer that to me in exchange for maybe a shout out, maybe like a DM, maybe like a cameo, my DMs, my email, my mailbox, my door is open. Okay? My next opinions on this bribery, this tomfoolery, okay, do not necessarily exclude any possible offers that any of you may have to put me on a luxury vacation via private jet. I would love an Alaska moment. I'm such an outdoorsy girl, would be obsessed, okay? I don't really have any political pull, but if I did, I wouldn't take bribes because obviously I have integrity, but if you would, in exchange for a smile and maybe a joke and maybe, follow back, my DMs are open. That being said, fuck that. This is a fucking bribe. Supreme Court, highest court in the land, their word is the last word. Are you fucking kidding me? It's just so blatant and so in our faces. Like, they're playing in our faces and they don't give a fuck. That's the worst part about all of this. Like, if this were like some big expose where they had to, really go through, have forensic accountants go through filings and figure out the connections. They're literally like, hi, yeah, so I got a fucking vacation out of this shit. Hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of shit. You want to see it? Pretty cool. Look at my pics. Posting photos. Yep. mega conservative Republican donor, the leader of the Federalist Society, directly connected to very, very discrete, specific political, opinions, and also judicial court opinions, that are very controversial, that literally are the matter of life and death for women and minorities and LGBTQ plus in this country. Upcoming cases, past cases, Roe v. Wade type cases, yeah. Y'all overturn Roe v. Wade, I don't give a fuck. I'm in fucking Alaska, look at my fish. Perfect. Justice Sotomayor. On July 11th, 2023, the Associated Press revealed that taxpayer-funded staffers of Justice Sotomayor routinely prodded public institutions to buy hundreds, sometimes thousands, of copies of Justice Sotomayor's books in anticipation of the justice's speaking engagements. These mass purchases were often presented by staffers as the implicit price of a speaking appearance by Justice Sotomayor. Such conduct is prohibited for members of Congress and the executive branch, who are statutorily barred from using government resources such as their staffers for personal financial gain. That's a no-no. Such conduct also plainly violates the Code of Conduct for United States judges, which prohibits the substantial use of, quote, chambers, resources, or staff to further such private interests. So you can't use the staffers that our taxpayer dollars are paying for to to push your book. Okay, that's a private thing. You can't do that. Okay, you can't double dip. Come on now, get your own staff. Additionally, when the court considered several cases that involved her publisher, Penguin Random House, Justice Sotomayor failed to recuse herself. Though the justice had no direct financial interest in the outcome of the Penguin Random House cases, her continuing receipt of royalties from the company likely merited disqualification because her, quote, impartiality might reasonably be questioned, end quote. Efforts to downplay all of the above previous mentionable lapses in ethical conduct have taken several forms. Justice Thomas's attorney, Elliot S. Burke, decried news reports of the justice's behavior as, quote, political blood sport motivated by hatred for his judicial philosophy, not by any real belief in any ethical lapses. I'll go on the record right now and say, no, I don't really care about your philosophy. I think this shit was ethically fucked. How are those several 38 fucking vacations you took over the last, couple years? You're out of your mind. Be serious. Obviously, the people that I named who are I'm just mentioning the most egregious examples of recent ethical lapses, particularly ones that made the news in 2023, were, 3 out of the 4 justices that I just, listed, that I just talked about are ones that have issued opinions that are notably very ideologically conservative and very controversial, and also not progressive at all when it comes to protecting individual rights. And that's just a fact. That's not an opinion. It's literally objective fact. Okay, write it down. And so because of that, a lot of conservative politicians, pundits, all of that have looked at and responded to the backlash over the clear ethical breaches, by specific Supreme Court justices as, oh, you just hate us because we're conservative. Okay, you know what I mean? No matter what you have to say about what the justices put in their opinions, which I always have a lot to say, okay? For this conversation specifically, homeboys, the fact that they're able to do this with absolutely zero punishment, recompense, any kind of outcome that shows that what they did is wrong is crazy town. That's crazy. I don't care who's doing it. This shit should not be allowed. This is corrupt by definition. We don't even have the appearance of impropriety anymore when these types of things are going on and nothing comes of it. That life term, you're still alive, you're still in that term, and you can still issue decisions, you can still change the face and facet and nature of the rights of this country with the strike of a pen, which, that's the issue. Kings and queens, okay, you just hate us because what we say. Well, yes, but also, this isn't the conservative justices only code of ethics. This is the everybody and your mama, because what in the fuck, okay? Recent Supreme Court ethics reform proposals would apply to all Supreme Court justices, no matter which party's president appointed them. Increased transparency would allow the court to subvert any anti-conservative narratives perpetuated by the media and ensure an unbiased account of all justices' activities and ethics breaches. And most importantly, ethics reform would create guardrails for the institution itself, so we actually have fucking confidence in this shit again. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to say, well, they would have gotten in trouble if they did all that shit, But they must be, it must be fine. No, I can't say that about anybody. What the fuck? Reinstate public confidence, please, please. Though some change has finally come from within the court, that change is insufficient to properly address the recent problematic conduct of several justices, and Congress must create enforceable ethics rules for the justices to follow. They have to. It's Congress's job because the judges can't govern themselves. That's obvious, okay? Anyone could have told you that. And it's just so fucking important. It's just so important. My rebuttal for today's episode is if it takes throwing up a painting of the Judgment of Cambyses on the outside of the Supreme Court, not as a threat, but just as a reminder, then let's do it because corruption is rampant. We need to fix it. And you should, honestly, in this election season, call your lawmakers, call your local politicians, local, state, county, everyone, and say, hey, like what is your plan stand? What is your opinion? What is your focus going to be with respect to judicial code of conduct, especially for the Supreme Court? Because basically Congress can fix this. They can make it apply to Supreme Court justices and say, hi, yeah, this is your shit. And if you don't follow it, these are the consequences. We need to have clear consequences because also the issue too is just, oh, they broke this rule. Did they break it? Yes, they broke it. They broke this rule, financial disclosures. If they didn't recuse them, okay, perfect. And they stare at us and go, yep, I broke it. Anyways, and go back to their fucking jobs. We need to fire more people. We need to make some things fireable offenses. And I'm not saying, oh, fire every justice who whatever, but I'm saying like there needs to be some risk here. We need some oversight. We need something. I don't know what the exact solution is, but at the very fucking least, we should start throwing down some gauntlets. I leave you with this painting. Have a great week. Love y'all. See you next week.